Alright, hey guys, and welcome to a new recording. So, today I want to talk a little bit about comic book films. So, a lot of us who were born like in the early 90s, 80s, even the early 2000s, it doesn't really matter what kind of culture, background you're from, where exactly you follow. We have been kind of bombarded with a like the entire um, kind of universe of comic books, and no matter how we try to escape it, it's nonetheless there. Now, of course, a lot of the time comic books have been considered something that's mostly for children, but that is not the case because, as for those of you who do read comics, you will definitely know that there is a lot of comics out there that is suitable for a large range of audience. So, comic book films recently have been very all over the place, I would say. They have kind of narrowed down their scope and increase their budget by quite a lot. They focus a lot more in terms of getting the audience rather than getting the message. And what I mean by this is that if we go back to like the beginning of comic books and how a lot of the comic book authors wrote their stories, a lot of their stories had a very detailed, very important message to kind of be sent to the audience. And over the years, when films started to be created from these comics, they kind of stayed true to the tone of sending an important message. Now, why is this important? I mean, they're just comic books, right? Because the biggest comic book films are superhero films. And superheroes do good because, it's in the name, superhero. So, very much like that, comic book films have to deliver what superheroes do, which is doing good, doing the right thing, giving the right representation, teaching the audience something valuable, something important, something motivational, to kind of have that, the innate sense to do good triggered in you so that you carry that forward uh, as you go on. Now, it's kind of strange to think that a film, that's basically just being marketed for the sake of views, is actually, like considerate about teaching people to do the right thing. But this is how these films actually started. And I'm going to go through a rundown of all the films that have taken place over the course of several years to kind of show you what exactly I mean. Now, after that, there's like a second part, right? We're going to go through like three different parts. So the second part is pretty much the kind of controversial problems we have when we have unique takes on the superhero films. So one of these is the things that I made fun of, which is when Avengers Endgames writers who screwed the entire film actually had to explain a lot of the film's mysteries and plot holes, which had a lot of stupid answers coming back from the Russo brothers. And when Zack Snyder was forced to explain all of the kind of plot holes in BVS, he was bombarded from all directions by the media, by fans, even his own fans, like his own DCEU fans. Whereas for the MCU, that was never really the issue. No one was kind of pointing out the fact that the Russo brothers had to do so much explanation because their plot was far more flawed than any other comic book film ever made, I dare say. And if you were to think about Zack Snyder's take on the Man of Steel, BVS, and unfortunately not the Justice League, because the Justice League was also done by a MCU boy, which is Joss Whedon. So, in Zack's takes on the superheroes way back since The Watchmen, he tries to take a very dark and serious tone to the superheroes. He tries to humanize them, he tries to manipulate them, he tries to see what makes them tick. And this is very important because we saw this in the Snyder Con, which was kind of, it's all over the internet, you guys can look it up. So in his speech to the fans, of course, his messages were a little unfiltered in the sense where a lot of other people who watched it felt offended. But hey, he's not talking to you. He's talking to his fans, his close friends. And it's not a press conference just because the recording went out. It's kind of like if I'm talking to my friend about how shit my teacher is in school, and my teacher gets a video of it, and my teacher gets offended. I mean, I'm not telling it to your face, I'm talking about it to my friend. For all you know, that's not something you should have heard of in the first place. Does it mean that I should not be talking like that? Does it mean that I should not be honest? I mean, it's kind of like when you go to your best friend and you tell him about how miserable your boss is or your life is, or you got to go to a therapist and you tell them that you kind of find it difficult to be in the space with your friends. It doesn't mean that you want to directly convey that. This is something that you talk to among your friends, among your fans, among your people. And if someone else is taking offense from that, then I mean, too bad for you. It's not even meant for you to hear. So, well, it's a good thing you heard it, because now you know that you're a total piece of shit. But I mean, once again, his ideas when he conveyed to his fans was very important in the sense where he was actually explaining how he likes to see what makes these superheroes tick, right? So his approach to the Watchmen was very, very, how I say, effective, because this method truly works with the way the Watchmen's story goes, right? It's dark, it's gritty, there's a lot of scary plot lines, and there are a lot of heroes that go through a lot of real dark shit, you know what I mean? So that same thing conveyed to the beloved character of Superman was really difficult for people to absorb, because not everyone is exposed to comics like the Dark Knight Returns, the Injustice universe, DC Dark, DC gods, what is it? Gods and monsters. Yeah, so there are a lot of things in comics that people are not really exposed to, and when the mass majority of the people who only know side A want things to be the way they know it, it kind of goes against their perception of things and forces them to give a backlash. So is this truly Snyder's fault? No, it's not his fault, because he has his own version of making a film. It doesn't mean that he has to follow the version that you like. Similarly, if you were to find out exactly how the Harry Potter books were written and you went and watched the film, there was a lot of fan backlash, especially for those who actually read the books before the films were ever even made, because the books came out way earlier. And one of my favorite books was The Goblet of Fire, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and I absolutely disliked the film. I mean, the film was wonderful in its own sense. Now that I'm learning to see things more objectively, like that's maybe how the director wanted to take it. He has limited runtime. He wanted to show the important bits and all that, maybe. But if I were to compare it to the way the book was written, the movie turns out to be a very bad film, because the book was amazing. The book had so many little twists and turns, a lot of insight on the way the characters think, and all of this were not conveyed on the screen. Why not? The director could have had 100 reasons why they chose not to do it, but does it mean that he's wrong? So at the end of the day, if I were to judge Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, I have to judge it solely as its own film, and not from the references it has had before. The only thing that I feel that we should look back to, like, before and after, is if there's a remake of something. Like if I literally say it's Terminator 2 and Terminator 2 remake, if you're remaking such a classic, cult classic film, it has to be better than its predecessor. Otherwise, you've just like wasted our time, because we rather just watch the original film again because it's just way better. So that's kind of my point of view. And if you guys have your own, ideas on it, do let me know. I'm open to your ideas. I'm open to your thoughts, and I'm open to discussion. I'm not going to say you guys are wrong just because you have an opinion. The same way that I feel that these directors are not wrong because they have their own opinions of these characters, and they want to show them in their own unique way. So that's what I think. So what really bothers me about this is the fact that this is point two, right? This is point two. How is it wrong if a director wants to depict a superhero film or a comic book film in their own way? So let's have a look at this, right? This is pretty much kind of the problem that the MCU has. And it's not the fact that he's fat, right? The thing about characters in the MCU is that they always go through a very unique path. They give the character a journey, they build them up, they show how they redeem themselves. Thor redeems himself in the very first film from being turned to a mere mortal, frying eggs and everything, and then finally defeating the Destroyer. And then in in the Dark World, of course, there wasn't that much of redemption for him because he was a pretty much Thor through and through. He was like a solid character. Then we go to Ragnarok, right? In Ragnarok, once again, they beat him down, they destroy his hammer, they make him go through a miserable character arc, and he suffers a lot, he loses a lot of stuff, and then he comes back really powerful, being the god of thunder and not the god of hammers. And then, well, Infinity War happens, and then he once again, apparently, even being the god of thunder requires another weapon. So now he becomes the god of axes because he has to make an axe to defeat Thanos. But it's kind of justified in the sense where he needs a Thanos killing kind weapon, which is what he said. So that means his own powers are definitely not enough. So this would this would come along with the possibility that his powers now far supersede that of him wielding Mjolnir before, right? Because he's not the god of thunder, he has unleashed his full power, so he doesn't need Mjolnir. But Stormbreaker makes him even better than that because Stormbreaker doesn't give him his powers, it allows him to use his powers in a much more precise manner, to take on Thanos or whatsoever. So they beat him down once again, they destroy his ship, they throw him into outer space, he gets found again, he forges another weapon, and he comes to defeat Thanos, and then he almost did it actually. He was the only character who could take on Thanos one-on-one, and then he was unsuccessful. Thanos escaped, and then in Endgame, he just straight up goes and slashes Thanos' head off, which is completely unlike the character in the very first place. But let's just assume that Thor has lost all sense of himself and everything, and then he defeats Thanos. What didn't really make it didn't really come to fruition is the fact that he went back to square one again for the fourth time. The first movie 1, the third movie 2, the Infinity War 3, and then Endgame 4. They undid his character for the fourth time, where he's now fat, he's now nearly useless, he drinks a lot, he's kind of not the not the all father that we expected him to be. And then when he fights Thanos, I thought at least he would be able to fight, but no, he becomes completely useless. They don't redeem him with the gauntlet. There is basically nothing to this character. His entire character arc is ruined. So what's the point in building up a character and making us go through the journey and then just bringing it back to square one? So this is another problem that we have. This is the third point that I'm going to come to. And the third point is, what are you trying to do with these characters? And this is very important, not just in terms of the building of the character, but also sometimes it comes down to, do you need this character in your universe? Like, if you think about it, the MCU is literally the biggest universe, right? It has like so many characters, easily 20 characters if you were to count some of their friends, and all these guys who fight along side them and everything, almost 20. So are these 20 characters actually necessary to make the best story? Or are you just overdoing it and losing track of your own characters and being unable to show all of them on screen the right way? Because you have to do justice to each and every one of your characters, and if you can't really do that, then what's the point in putting them there? Because you're going to upset someone who is actually a fan of that character. And one of that really pisses me off was Black Widow's sacrifice in Endgame. Sorry, and in Endgame, Black Widow was the only one that literally wanted to jump off the cliff for the sake of humanity, and of course she was like competing against Clint Barton, Hawkeye, who also was someone who was willing to sacrifice himself. So these two characters, way before anyone else, like went up against Thanos, these characters are going to die a cold, dark death, falling off the edge of a cliff on a planet in a reality and timeline that they have no idea of. And what kind of respect are they given? Like a friend of mine is making fun of this, saying that Tony Stark got a beautiful send off on a river with the his original power source, that says that Tony Stark has a heart, proof that Tony Stark has a heart. What did Black Widow get? Hulk just threw a bench for her, and that was it. That's all we got to see, Hulk throwing a bench. There was no proper moment to mourn for her. There was no scene of her funeral. Not even at the end when everything was over. There was no tombstone for Natasha Romanoff, you know? And that's what really kind of upsets me about that, because her character did so much, and we do have fans of Black Widow. But she didn't get justice. Why? Just because you needed Iron Man dead so you can get Robert Downey out, so you give him a send off? And his send off was pretty bad too. I mean, I've already mentioned that before, so I don't want to really put too much thought into that. And then what about the Hulk? The Hulk was completely broken down in Infinity War, and then was never given a chance to redeem himself in Endgame. What, he's going to take the gauntlet and do a snap, and that's it? He doesn't fight? Professor Hulk is useless? Like, what's the difference between the Hulk and Professor Hulk if all he got to do was a snap? And that shouldn't even have been him. Like, Thor could have done it and not lost an arm, for all I know, because Thor could wield a weapon powerful enough to take on the gauntlet himself. And of course, there's that entire plot hole of how Tony Stark could build an Infinity Gauntlet, how Tony Stark could extract the ether that even Odin didn't know how to extract. But anyway, I already made a video on this. The plot holes in this film are ridiculous and insane, and it makes it such a trash film. But Infinity War was nice. It was a very well, slow-paced, yet intriguing film that kept people close. It was gripping. It captured the moment of every single character. It kind of made everyone get a chance to greet each other, to get to know each other. They couldn't put everyone on screen in the same area, so they kind of split them up. They gave them their own things to do. It was really nice how they distributed that. Now, anyway, enough of this, right? Enough of this. Let's try to go through some of the films, right, from back in the day, to try to understand how these films have revolutionized. So of course the very first superhero films goes way back to the Superman films, right? And as I mentioned this before, Superman 1978 is definitely one of my top 10 superhero films. It's an amazing film. Even to this day you can watch it and still enjoy it. And then it followed up with Superman 2, Superman 3, and then Supergirl got a chance. In 1984 we already had the first kind of female superhero hitting the big screen. So it wasn't it like, of course Wonder Woman had like a TV series, I believe. Yeah, she probably had something like that. But Supergirl hit it in a feature film, which was fantastic. So Supergirl was the first. And it was not Captain Marvel, it's not Wonder Woman, it was not what you fanboys think, it was Supergirl. And Supergirl's film may not have been the best for its time, but it did justice. And I mean, for its time, I would say it's a pretty good film. I mean, if you watch it today, you may not enjoy it as much, but they did it. They still had their chance at it. And then the Superman 4 came, and then finally the Dark Knight took the screen with back-to-back films, and people loved him, right? Batman is kind of the fanboy crush of a lot of DC fanboys, because apparently he's the human that can do whatever there is necessary against plot convenience to get the job done. So he's kind of the Russo brothers in a suit. That's what he is, as it turns out. But anyway, the Batman films came, and from the kind of morale sense of justice that superhero brought to the screen, Batman brought a much darker tone to it, a much more realistic twist where you're not as mighty, as shiny, as pretty as Superman, but you still got to get the job done in your own city. So this is more about a vigilante who's trying to defend Gotham City, and he does his best with his cool gadgets and tricks and a lot of money. And I mean, they did a fantastic job. The early Batman films were truly a success. Batman Returns, it was a little bit too gritty, too uncanny, but nonetheless, I liked it. It was not a bad film for me. Batman Forever was amazing. Batman and Robin, I agree with the suit and the weird things that happen in this film, but there was an attempt. All right, that's all I can say. There was an attempt. Regardless, the film became far more action-packed, far more commercialized, and the kind of villains started to control the film. Now, way back in the Superman films, of course, we had a few really important villains who really helped to control the film. And back then, Lex Luthor was like, one of the most iconic villains. But then, when we came to the newer Batman films, we started to see more and more villains on the screen, right? We started getting multiple villains like Ivy, Mr. Freeze, the Riddler, Two-Face, and then the villains started to play a very important role, and Batman's sidekick started to play an even more important role. So we had a lot more people to see on the screen. And then came Blade. Blade is a personal favorite. Not everyone likes this film. Some people feel that this is one of the best superhero films, and I kind of agree to say that Blade was unique for its time because this was pretty much the first superhero film that featured a non-white superhero. And I mean, that need not entirely be the biggest thing, but for people of their time, this was a revolution because it's kind of like Obama becoming president, right? I mean, end of the day, he's still going to do the same job every other president did. So more importantly, you will want to focus on whether he's a good person or not. But the fact that it was a non-white president for the first time is still revolutionary because it opens the minds of people to say that it's been done. So once it's been done, it can be done again and again, and it's not going to be a new thing anymore. And the first step is always a step that people notice. So it was kind of important in that sense. And then came the X-Men films that featured the most number of superheroes on a screen. And of course, not all of them were equally important because this is pretty much the Wolverine's universe, I would say. This is not the X-Men that I used to read about in the comics where Cyclops is truly the leader and Wolverine is just this crazy smelly guy who just beats people up. Xavier really controls the battlefield. It was really, really different in that sense. Nonetheless, it was a great film, and of course Blade followed up with another film, and then came Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man for me was a personal favorite, right? This was a film that was a massive blockbuster hit. Unlike any, look at this, 403. Like, look at the other films before. They aren't even close. They're not even close. This is 403 million in gross. And that's when Spider-Man like kind of revolutionized the modern cinematic universes for comic book films. But why I really like Spider-Man was because Spider-Man straight up started with the most important message, which is with great power comes great responsibility. And this is very, very important because this was the reason superhero films were made in the first place. And Spider-Man put that back on track by teaching people that it's not just about having the power, it's about knowing how to do the right thing even though you are almighty or powerful. And the innate nature to do good that Peter Parker has is what really made Spider-Man shine. And if you watch Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, starring of course the amazing Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, James Franco, and Kirsten Dunst, nonetheless, this film was really all about Peter Parker struggling, right? The struggle of a kid who's got his newfound superpowers and he has to adapt to it and decide what kind of person he really wants to be now that he can do things that ordinary people can't. So this was a film that was really, really important, fundamental to this entire revolution of superhero films. And then we come to X2, right? X-Men United. Also a good film. I don't get the negative reviews on this film. It's a great film, X2. I enjoyed it. X2 also once again threw in a lot of different heroes and villains and all of that. And once again, this was more so an internal conflict, right? This was kind of the X-Men trying to, escape and survive and all that, deciding if they're doing the right thing, being unsure of themselves. But it didn't really focus on the importance of what a superhero is. This was more so just a film that, was made for fun. And of course, Bryan Singer did a great job nonetheless. It was a fantastic film. But why did it lack all the elements that Spider-Man lacked? Why couldn't it live up to that? You know? Then we came to the Hulk, and the first Hulk was quite an amazing film to watch. But this is not a superhero film by any means. This is more so a film about a guy who's just, turns out to in a bad accident and turns out to be really angry, then causes a lot of destruction, and then at the end of the day he's forced to defeat, the the worst of the two evils, which is his father, and kind of ends up becoming the hero nonetheless. But it's not a superhero film because the Hulk never thought about actually saving anyone. If he did, it wasn't clear enough. That was for sure. Then came Daredevil. Now, this Daredevil was an average, below average film. Of course, it wasn't that great, nothing special about it. But this Daredevil still had some values. It showed this lawyer who was trying to do the right thing, trying to take on the mob by himself, doing some vigilante stuff. It kind of was trying to pull us back into that core values of a superhero, but it was not able to deliver that sense on the screen. We came to Catwoman, which I don't even want to talk about. Blade Trinity, which went very far from what the first two Blades were about. Um, so yeah, that's what I want to say. I don't want to touch too much about that. Then came The Punisher, and The Punisher is kind of that film which teaches you a very strange sense of justice, right? This is the kind of film that Americans will love because they have guns everywhere. So, I mean, no offense, but seriously, killing isn't the only way, right? Which is what Daredevil teaches you. Nonetheless, the Punisher does do justice, right? He does serve criminals with justice by killing them, and he's not wrong to do that because that's his way of seeing it. But by the hand of the law, he is kind of still a criminal. So it turns out to be that kind of questionable character with, kind of mixed perception of what is right and wrong. And it works. The Punisher was a film that actually made people question their own sense of morality to say, would you just rather kill everyone who does bad? Like, wouldn't that just solve all your problems? So that was what The Punisher was, which is really nice to see. It was a movie that kind of brings us back to that question. And a lot of the Punisher comics are really dark, a lot darker than the film. They really show you a lot about pedophiles, rapists, people who try to bomb others, and the Punisher just goes all out, bang, bang, bang. And you kind of want to cheer for him, and also address the fact that he's still a murderer, but I mean, at war, like when you're really at war, it's kill or be killed. And, the Punisher just had to choose the side of kill, which was kind of the way he took it. And then we come back to our wonderful and kind of, good Samaritan, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who returns with the best film, in my opinion, in all of superhero history, Spider-Man 2. And this is true. As it says, Peter Parker is beset with troubles in his fading personal life as he battles brilliant scientist named Dr. Otto Octavius. Troubles in his fading personal life. This is what highlighted the film so much. It really puts you into the feet of a guy who is just trying to do the right thing, suffers with the need to balance his dual personality, rather persona. One is Spider-Man and one is Peter Parker. and he has to find a way to make everything right, to get the love of his life, to live a normal life, to defeat Otto Octavius, to be the Spider-Man that the city needs, and the struggles that he has to face. And after all of that, still remembers the core value that his Uncle Ben taught him. With great power comes great responsibility. That was the most important thing, the highlight that made Spider-Man 2 the best superhero film for me. Alright, then moving on, we have Elektra. Nothing really special about this film. That was an attempt, that I can say. Fantastic Four. Now, this is another film that kind of put a lot of heroes on the screen once again. And what is their point? Were they trying to save the world? Were they actually coming together to do that? No, they were just coming together to defeat the villain at the end, which was Doctor Doom. And before any of that, they kind of got caught in a mess and accidentally became heroes. So they agreed to do good because they enjoyed the feeling of people cheering at them, and they realized that they have to use these powers for something good. But they never really worked it out to the very end. So the Fantastic Four kind of was underwhelming. And then we have the Batman universe, the trilogy by Christopher Nolan, which was fantastic. Probably the best thing that could have happened to Batman was falling into the hands of Nolan. And Batman Begins really brought us back into the importance of a person who has an innate nature to do good. Because you have this scene when Bruce Wayne goes to train with Ra's al Ghul, right, at what's that thingy? The League of Assassins. And then he refuses to kill the guy that's put before him because he doesn't want to take another's life when he can choose not to. Because he has a choice. His enemy is unarmed, defenseless, on the ground. He doesn't want to be the guy who kills him because that makes him a murderer. And Batman kind of emphasizes on this fact to the very end, where he has to kind of leave Ra's al Ghul on a train that's leading its way to death because Batman just doesn't want to be the guy to kill him. So he lets him die. But that's kind of questionable. It's kind of like when you see an accident on the side of the road and it's not your fault. Doesn't mean that you should not go and try to help. But anyway, besides that, it was a fantastic film. It truly put the superhero films back on track after whatever this was. Then we have X-Men: The Last Stand. This was a film that kind of, I felt, did a bit more justice to the X-Men because they were truly on the side of humans this time, and they had to help the other mutants that were being attacked by Magneto, because Magneto wanted to get the mutant who can apparently nullify other mutants' abilities. So the X-Men had to make a stand against all that. And then there was a kind of Dark Phoenix thing, plot all mixed up into it. Kind of unnecessary, but nonetheless, they ended it with an epic finale between Wolverine, who should have just died on the spot, against Phoenix, who finally had to meet her demise. So The Last Stand tried to make things work by showing how good the X-Men are as a team. And I mean, it really did well in terms of the action, in terms of the story, the fun-paced thing that they brought, and once again, a lot of characters on screen. So you notice this pattern, like the pattern where the films with the lesser characters like Batman and Spider-Man clearly do a lot better, right? Because they get to focus more so on that character building themselves. Whereas films like the X-Men are so divided that you don't get to see much of that. Then we get Superman Returns. It's a film that I liked, but honestly, it's not that great of a film. But nonetheless, it was a film that taught us that Superman, no matter how he struggles to be himself, is still very much a person who would do anything to do good. But this film didn't really give us enough time on the kind of depth of what Superman's character is, and therefore we didn't get to learn much from it, but we got to see a lot of things that Superman did do. Ghost Rider was a fun film. I'm okay with this film. It's not a superhero film by any means. It's just a film of a personal vendetta gone wrong and then turns out into another personal vendetta. That's pretty much what it was. So it's a good film on its own, but I mean, it's not a superhero film by any means. So that's that. Then we have Spider-Man 3. This is a film that a lot of people didn't like because, and then that whole Toby dancing scene comes along, right? But here's the thing. Um, there's nothing really wrong about this film, plot wise. Like, it had a great cast, it had a great actor, it had a great villain. The only thing that this film really suffered from, I felt, was the too many villain syndrome, which should have been pointed out by many other people. Sandman, what do you call this? Venom, the Goblin, all in a single film. And Peter's relationship to Harry and the way he kind of turns Harry to his side was really nice, right? It was very important. It was kind of funny and weird at the same time, but nonetheless, it was a necessary plot to kind of put their friendship back on track and say that he will not be like his father at the end of the day because he still has the innate nature of being good. And although he was so vengeful about Spider-Man because he turned out to be his best friend, Peter Parker, he finally decided to give him another chance because they both want to save the woman that apparently they both love, Mary Jane. And of course, it turns out with Goblin dying in the hands of Venom, which is really an emotional scene. And then Sandman just disintegrating away because he realizes that he has done wrong. So I guess the villain that wasn't really necessary in this film was Sandman, because I mean, of course, it was awesome, Sandman, to the very end. But he kind of complicated this dark Spider-Man plot was what they were going for, because they were going to show Spider-Man going through another dark episode of himself, and then going up against his friend, and then realizing they both have a common enemy, which is the Venom. But Sandman just came and just kind of added to the background of this entire complex plot because he was just a sand monster in the end, just trashing stuff around. He didn't have a clear motive because his entire idea was that he wanted to help his daughter, and then he turns out he wants to take revenge on Spider-Man because Spider-Man is stopping him from helping his daughter. But I mean, a lot of other ways to take it. Sandman could have just gone into where his like go and ask for help or just had a word with Spider-Man saying he needs to help his daughter or something, and then it could have turned out to be a really important, sequence. But we never really got that to the very end, so he just faded off and flew away. Spider-Man 3 turned out to be a little bit of a mess, but it still showed very important lessons of trying to do good and friendship. We just kind of stayed true to the Spider-Man's the tone of the three films that took place. But I hated the Venom though. Venom was not the Venom I wanted at all. Then we have Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, where you actually get to see them do a lot more good than they did in the previous film. They saved a lot more people. They tried to help the Silver Surfer and all that. And then Galactus came along. I felt this film did a lot better than its predecessor, but it still lacked overall because it was just a mediocre film. It didn't really have much importance given to the characters to the point where we will actually appreciate them. Nah, we just kind of they were just there on screen and we were just kind of watching them. That's what it felt throughout. You never want to really be there in their shoes because you don't really feel for them in any way. So yeah, there's that. Except for the big guy, I think you kind of feel for the thing. But anyway, The Dark Knight. I mean, who hasn't said enough about this film, right? This film once again proved to us why Batman is special because he really tried to help prove that the Joker is wrong. More so than taking on the Joker head on, more so than beating up bad guys, this film was all about, you know, Batman proving to the Joker that there is still good in Gotham, and the people of Gotham deserve a second chance. That's what the Batman wanted to prove. And at the very end, he did because the two ships did not detonate, and then Batman defeated the Joker. And there are a lot of other important scenes in this film that shows how Batman as well struggles with his dual life about trying to be Bruce Wayne and the Batman because there's that entire relationship with him and his girlfriend, and then Harvey Dent comes in, and they really made Harvey Dent a very important character in this film because he turned out to eventually be Gotham's White Knight that the Joker managed to turn into a villain, and the Joker kind of won in that sense because the Joker proved to Bruce Wayne that you can turn anyone bad once you get them to snap, and he managed to do that to Harvey Dent. but the Batman still had to say that Harvey Dent was someone he couldn't save, but he can still save everyone else, so he takes the blame in the end and goes away. So it kind of, the Joker kind of won, but Batman just made sure that no one else knew that the Joker won and just taking the blame for the greater good. That was kind of the Dark Knight's film, which was amazing, well thought of. The villain was fantastic. Every character in this film was given importance to. The building of the personal touch of Bruce Wayne was very nice. Amazing film. Then Iron Man. Now, the MCU kicked off very, very late, right? Very, very late. All right, this is 2008's Iron Man. Let's not talk about the Hulk that happened before this. All right, 2008's Iron Man, followed by the Incredible Hulk. So this Iron Man truly put the Iron Man character that we all knew in the comics, like on the board, because I remember Iron Man transforming from like a briefcase, which he did in the second film. But anyway, in this film, it kind of really brought me back to that moment of him finally creating his first suit. And it was truly touching. It was important, and it kind of showed Tony Stark going from this guy who's just focusing on his craft, manufacturing weapons, dealing them, making money out of it, to eventually questioning where exactly do these weapons go, whose hands do they end up in. Has he been doing the right thing? And then he realizes that Obadiah Stane has been abusing his tech and delivering it to these warmongers to kind of keep the war going so that they can keep dealing weapons. So Tony Stark kind of has to put an end to all of it, and therefore he turns out to be his own vigilante of his own corporation to kind of take on Obadiah Stane and put an end to all of it. So there are a little bit of plot holes in the sense where Tony Stark can't control his own corporation. Weird, considering he's so smart and everything. Regardless, it was nice to see the fact that it showed a character like Tony Stark, who's a selfish asshole kind of character, actually turning out to be the guy who starts to question his morality and do good. So that was that. The Incredible Hulk, once again, more so a story about an angry guy, not really a superhero film, but it was necessary for them to kind of get the Hulk saga kicked off, so they kind of did it for kicks, and that was pretty much what this film was. The Punisher, Warzone. Below average film, nothing really great about it. Fun to watch, not really a superhero film once again. It's more so just about a guy who kills people, and then if they're bad, oh, it's good if they're bad because that's the right thing apparently. And that's it. That's what this film was. Then we have X-Men Origins Wolverine. This was a nice film because it kind of showed us a lot more into Wolverine's origins that everyone keeps questioning on all of the previous X-Men films because apparently no one wants to read the comics. So we got to have it in live action. And that was nice to see. But how does it make him a superhero? Like, I mean, I get it, it's X-Men Origins Wolverine, but does he really go out there wanting to save people? No, I didn't see any of that. So sorry, Wolverine. You're better off with the X-Men. Iron Man 2, another film about Tony Stark, getting revenged by another person apparently who knows his tech. Just your typical story. Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. Don't want to talk about it. Green Lantern. This was a film that it's so bad, but there are good things about it. That's the kind of film Green Lantern was. Because how Jordan ends up joining a corporation that does good, right? He's also a pilot that works for the military, so he's, like vowed to do the right thing. And then it turns out in the end he just has to do the right thing to the very end. So there wasn't ever a question of his morality or anything like that. He never had a problem with his living his doer personality. Nothing very special about being a superhero, but more so about being an intergalactic hero that just had to stop the villains that are coming to invade the earth. So it was more so just stopping the apocalypse. I don't think he really got a chance to like be Green Lantern on the streets as much because he was so hell-bent on just going for the end battle. So yep, that's this movie. It's a really bad movie with one or two good things in it. So that's that. Thor, and so we begin with the entire like calamity of Thor. Right, give me a sec, I'll be right back. And I'm back. So, Thor. Okay, here's the thing, right? Thor was a bad film, okay? Because we start off with this guy who is a brutal warrior. He enjoys killing things. He enjoys causing war, which is why he gets banished because he doesn't really question all that. And then on Earth, he basically just gets to live as a mortal, and apparently he learns everything he needs to be worthy. Like it doesn't really fulfill his character because where does he learn on how to be king or to be kind or to help people, because all he does is just do some homework like frying eggs, probably doing laundry or something, and then as it turns out he's a good guy now. Like what? That's it? I mean, yeah, you see, it says the powerful but arrogant god Thor. So he has been taught not to be arrogant anymore because now he's mortal. But he still had a lot of other problems, like wanting to kill everything that he faces, wanting to just overrule and overpower everything that faces him. Like because he feels like he's king. But in this film, we never really got to see that change. It just more so kind of just mellowed down into Chris Hemsworth, and that's what happened in this film. Nonetheless, it was a really nice film, thanks to Anthony Hopkins, whose performance as Odin in this film truly carried a lot of the scenes that were very important. And I mean, Chris Hemsworth is a great actor as well as Thor. I just feel that he should have been given a lot more serious role, um, rather than being made fun of for the sake of comedy. And this is where the MCU's comedy starts to set in. Captain America: First Avenger, probably one of the best films. I enjoyed this film. This was a great film about Captain America, the guy who actually wants to do good and finally gets the ability to do good and then does good. See that? That's the kind of progression you need. He goes through a very kind of slow start where he does shows and all the kinds of things like that, and then finally he agrees to use his abilities to do the right thing. He impresses everyone, he saves a lot of soldiers, then finally he goes on to take the last villain, and then he sacrifices himself for the sake of the world. A very, very fulfilling story of Captain America. This is an amazing film. 6.9. This thing deserves, yeah, probably a little bit more. Maybe it's an 8, right? This is a great film. Everything you needed about Captain America in one film. And yeah, there you have it. This is how you make a good superhero film. Alright, then we have X-Men First Class. So, First Class is kind of an interesting film. It really brought us into perspective of what the X-Men were like before everything went to shit. And then you kind of get to see a lot of superheroes being, or rather these X-Men being very, human-like in their, back in the day forms. And then they are challenged by, what is the guy's name? There was this guy that, um, Sebastian Shaw, yeah, Sebastian Shaw. So they were challenged by Sebastian Shaw, who is really, really powerful, and they kind of have to come together to kind of stop him. And then, they have this sense of question whether they need to stop him because, or should they just let him destroy the human race, which is what Xavier and Magneto's question is in every single film that they keep redoing. Like they have no other story between those two besides I want to destroy humanity. No, we have to protect humanity. Okay, then let's fight. It's pretty much every single film. So, aside from that sense, X-Men First Class really showed us a lot of these characters in their down-to-earth kind of fashion, which allowed us to connect really well with them. And they too kind of start to question if they're on the right or wrong side. So that was kind of nice to see. The Avengers. The Avengers was a good film, right? It was a film that actually taught us why we need these superheroes to come together. But it was a bad film in the sense where they did not really ever work together as a team until the very last fight. So it's like all of a sudden they can understand everything Captain says, they have invisible earpieces, they can communicate across the battlefield, and apparently they are suddenly so well coordinated. The Hulk was nearly killed Black Widow in like two scenes earlier. Now suddenly he's willing to work with the rest of them. There was no clear explanation as to how an angry Hulk is angry when he needs to be and then not angry when he needs to be, and then Banner says, I'm always angry. Like, excuse me, like, what the hell are you talking about? It doesn't really add up. And then we have Thor, who's ridiculously powerful, like taking on half the battlefield by himself. Iron Man taking half the battlefield by himself. And then we have like Hawkeye and Cap, who's just running around the streets trying to put the situation together. And then we have Black Widow, who is there, right? Unfortunately. So the scaling of power kind of made things difficult, but they did kind of show what each character has as a special thing to do, like Black Widow taking on Loki and trying to fool him, which I felt was kind of funny because God is Loki's like the god of mischief. He should be the one in charge like all the time, but for the fact that they're showing that Black Widow can outsmart him, like what's really happening here? Like, are you telling me that Black Widow is smarter than Loki? So these are the inconsistencies that they come up with. And the representation of Loki in the MCU is really bad. It's nothing like in the comics. In the comics, Loki can take on Doctor Strange. Over here, he falls for 20 minutes or something? Yep, some stupid thing like that. Dark Knight Rises. This was the worst of the Dark Knight trilogy, in my opinion. It was, I think, I mean, it could have been better than Begins, but it was kind of the in-betweener of the film because it suffers from that syndrome where they have kind of done everything they could with Batman. So now they kind of want to finish him off, right? So they need to come to an end. So when they're trying to come to the closure that they need to, um, Bruce Wayne has to go through, this entire being undone syndrome against Bane. And his fight against Bane was actually really bad. It looks so unrealistic. But regardless, what really troubled me was the fact that I mean, I get it, you're old and all that, but you've still been living in your own cave and investigating for all these years. It's at least expected that you would go in prepared for anything, even a Bane fight. And taking on something as strong as Bane with your bare fists, when at the end of the film you had like your poison darts and everything, it's just kind of weird. Like, what, you only had your poison darts because you have to like decide if you want to take it with you? That doesn't really make sense. You should be prepared for any situation because you're still the Dark Knight. But nonetheless, they kind of had to go with it. Otherwise, I guess no one's going to stop the Batman anyway. And Bane was underwhelming. He was not really the Bane that we used to see in the comics. He was really tiny. But nonetheless, Tom Hardy had a fantastic performance as Bane, respectfully. He did really well. His dialogues were amazing. But this just was not the Bane we saw here was not really scary enough. It was kind of like you needed camera angles to be just right, just so that he's scary. Because apparently, Tom Hardy is a lot smaller than Christian Bale, and we kind of all know that. So there was that. The Amazing Spider-Man. So Uncle Ben had to die again, but great power comes great responsibility. Yes, no, maybe. This was just a reset of Spider-Man. And Spider-Man somehow turns out to be the hero that always tries to still do the right thing. So The Amazing Spider-Man was just that. It was very nice to see him, return, taking on the Lizard. It was amazing, the fight scenes between them. And, Spider-Man just trying to save the city together with Gwen Stacy was a lot cooler than we thought it would be. And it was a really good film in that sense. So I guess Spider-Man films do kind of do better, I guess. Well, we're about to find out. Iron Man 3. Don't want to talk about it. This is just another version of the MCU trying to undo a character and then redo them. And then he like destroys his entire Iron Legion. And then he says that I am Iron Man. And then in Spider-Man Far From Home, he builds a new Iron Legion, except now they're drones. Drone tech. Does that even sound like Tony Stark? He was the guy that destroyed his Iron Legion. It's so weird. Thor, The Dark World. This was, no doubt, a really dark world. This is a film that is also funny because Tony Stark created a syringe which Rocket used to extract the ether from Jane Foster, and Odin couldn't extract the ether in the Dark World. Yeah. Anyway, that's a mistake of another film, not this. This film on its own was a really fun and cool film to watch. Not really a superhero film, more so, just Thor taking on these really bad guys. But it kind of makes sense because, I mean, who else are going to fight them besides Thor, right? So Thor had to take on this kind of interdimensional threat because he's kind of morphing I don't know, like realities and all that. And then Jane Foster had to use her alternate dimension tech to kind of seal these different portals and use them as a way to fight his enemies. So it is kind of cool nonetheless. It is not a bad film. It's an average film. That's what I would say. The Wolverine, a really good film of him trying to be himself, but it was totally different from the original Origins film. It was a lot more true to the character of what the Wolverine tries to do in his like daily expeditions, the troubles that he goes through and the people that he faces, and definitely better than X-Men Origins by all means. But this film kind of had a lot of like subpar plots, like his plot of visiting this guy who apparently was someone he saved and everything like that. And that guy invites him over after all these years, and then he decides to stay there, and then the guy has to like poison him instead of just bringing the what do you call that iron robot, right, that comes to take him on. So the kind of choices the characters make in the Wolverine is kind of weird. If the villain wanted, he could have just defeated the Wolverine there and then, but he didn't do that. He kind of waited at the end of the film. So the build-up was kind of awkward, but nonetheless, Hugh Jackman's performance kind of helped most of this film survive. So that was the Wolverine. The Man of Steel, probably the best superhero origin film. Great movie, a lot of detailing, a lot of very cinematic moments in this film. This is literally the superhero that you hear about that has the innate kind of ideal to do good. And that is what Henry Cavill was doing as Superman in this film. He really carried that character throughout the film, saving as many lives as he could, to the point when Lois Lane tries to track him down. She literally has to track him down by the tales of him doing good that are told to her from other people. And then she realizes that the best thing about the Man of Steel is that he is a good person at heart. And that's what makes him special. And that's why he is, the rightful protector of the earth. And to the very end, he carries that value and he takes on the villain in a very generic dialogue. I'm going to stop you, Zod, and everything like that. But he does that. Zack Snyder pays homage to the original Superman 1978 film. There's one of the Superman films where he takes on the other three Kryptonians. Yeah, Superman 2. So Zack Snyder kind of pays homage to Superman 2 in a lot of ways in that film, and you can notice the kind of similarity and differences, and you really appreciate the way this film is taken, the tone of the film, the kind of sense of ideal that he carries and his father teaches him in the short moments that he has. Everything about this film was amazing, and yeah, it's definitely the best superhero origin film. Amazing Spider-Man 2, a good follow-up to the original Spider-Man, but it had that kind of too many villain problem as well, because the Goblin villain was not really well developed in this film. The Goblin villain kind of like had a forced plot where they just needed him to be good in some way, and then Spider-Man doesn't really know how to help him, and then just has to go along with what happens, what turns out to happen. Nonetheless, we got to see Gwen Stacy die, so maybe something good did happen or not so. Anyway, Captain America the Winter Soldier, fantastic film, a great follow-up to the Captain America films, probably one of the best films as well. It's just almost like watching a really good kind of, what do you call this, super spy film, because it felt very realistic in terms of action, in terms of melee combat and all of that. But what really was extra about this is that just Captain America is super strong. That's pretty much it. And yep, that was the gist of this film. It was really fun to see altogether. Guardians of the Galaxy, a revolutionary film, I would say, because this film brought together a team of five, and unlike the Avengers, these guys are not anywhere near as famous, but you can actually learn to cherish each and every one of these characters because they were all shown relatively well. They all had a balanced role in this, and they all had like kind of a good scene and on their own in their own respect in this film. So all of that was really nice to see. So that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Then we have X-Men Days of Future Past. Um, Probably the best X-Men film in my opinion. It showed us a lot of different characters and it gave them each a necessary role and they all fulfill their role really well. And this is all about the X-Men trying to save not just themselves, not just the past, but also the future itself. This was a fantastic superhero film and a film that really brought together the past and future universes, allowing Sir Patrick Stewart to morph into James McAvoy. That's pretty much it. Ant-Man. This was a fun movie. It's not a superhero film, still more of a personal vendetta kind of film. Nonetheless, it was a fun film, showed a lot of new things, and a lot of kids started buying Ant-Man toys, I guess. That's pretty much it. But yeah, it was a good start to the Ant-Man franchise, nonetheless, which is not the biggest by any means, but Paul Rudd is just such a wonderful guy in terms of the way he portrays this kind of dad role in Ant-Man that it's really nice to watch this film. It's a really good kind of TV movie, I would say. That was pretty much what it was. Avengers Age of Ultron. I feel this was a lot better than the first film because this was the Avengers actually working together trying to stop a real threat. And Ultron as a villain was really, really strong and powerful. Ultron had a mission, a goal, and he was trying to fulfill it. The humanization of Ultron was kind of questionable, but I guess it was because of the genetics code of Jarvis that was in him and the fact that the Mind Stone allows him to think in a very humanized manner, and also the fact that he learns from human technology kind of makes the point of why he needs to be human, and that is the reason why he also feels this emotion of anger. Why Ultron has rage inside of it is because it doesn't know how to control these human emotions, and starts to throw a tantrum at everything else around it because it realizes that the Avengers are kind of a plague that's causing everything to undo itself, and so Ultron tries to destroy everything. So this film was really nice, a lot better thought of. A lot of the characters got fulfilled. Hawkeye did fantastic. He had a good role, a very important role. Black Widow as well. Thor and Iron Man were there when necessary. Captain was shown saving a lot of people on the streets. The Hulk actually helped fight and save people as well. It brought the characters of the Scarlet Witch and the Quicksilver, who unfortunately had to die in the very first film, but also had a fulfilled character development that led to the kind of raged personality that Scarlet Witch will carry for many other films to come. Age of Ultron, guys. Fantastic Four. Don't want to talk about it. Deadpool, not a superhero film, a personal vendetta film, a really good one, a really funny one, a good R-rated film, but not a superhero film. BVS, fantastic film. We could not have asked for, you know, too many things in a BVS film because it's literally about Batman and Superman. But we also got to see Wonder Woman, we got to see Doomsday. There were so many other things in this film that truly came as a surprise for most of us who didn't really watch every single trailer. Nonetheless, the cinematography in this film by Zack Snyder was insane. Every scene felt so heavy and so beautiful. There were so many little details about it. The tone, the music, everything was really well set. The thing that this film kind of lacked was the strange pacing of it and the kind of loopholes here and there, which was later on very clearly detailed out in the extended cut. And in the like the full version of BBS, the extended edition of the director's cut, we kind of get to see the rest of the things that we were questioning about, and it actually turns out to be a very holistic film. And what really kind of puts the pacing of this film off is the fact that Zack Snyder is a very visual oriented director, therefore he lacks the kind of witty dialogues that the MCU gives. And because everyone was so, like washed into watching these Avengers films, that when they watched BVS they didn't really understand what was happening, because they're so used to films like these, and they thought that this is just going to be another superhero film like any other, and it was not. BVS was setting up for the Injustice universe. It was setting up for a world that a lot of comic book fans was just hoping for, and unfortunately, it was taken away by Joss Whedon and the Justice League. So there's that. Anyway, Civil War, a really dumb film where Iron Man doesn't understand that uh, the Winter Soldier is brainwashed to killing his parents, and he still wants to kill the Winter Soldier. That's kind of dumb. But nonetheless, Civil War, they needed a reason for these two to fight, and they found it, and it was Bucky, and this was Martha, right? So what's the difference? I don't see the difference. Anyway, being biased about it, it's kind of silly. I feel that the Martha scene was brilliant in BBS. It made perfect sense. No one thought about it, and Snyder brought it up. Fantastic thing to think about. Civil War, it was blatantly all about Bucky. One guy is trying to protect Bucky, the other guy is trying to kill Bucky, and then, Bucky. And then you had to bring a bunch of kids to an airport fight where no one apparently wants to hurt each other. I have no idea what the hell was going on. Apparently, no one had the right tech to kind of capture the other guys. Like, I mean, if Iron Man wanted, he could have just used tranquilizers on all of them or something. But I don't know. It was just a film for show, just to sell tickets and make money. That's what it was. X-Men Apocalypse. I don't know what happened in this film. A lot of things happened in this film, but all I remember is that Xavier and Magneto were fighting once again for the same stupid reason. So there's that. Suicide Squad. Hmm. Hmm. This film had a lot of potential, but with subpar execution, it wasn't up to its standards. But it did have a lot of potential, though, right? It had a lot of interesting things about the villains and all. Just a good cast and everything, but subpar plot. Excuse me. So there's Suicide Squad. Anyway, Doctor Strange, fantastic film, right? Fantastic film, but it had a lot of unnecessary things, like going back to the treatment ward again and again, just to build a relationship between Doctor Strange and his like ex-girlfriend Doctor, in which is unnecessary because it never helped the rest of the film and never helped him in future films and may never help him ever again. So I don't see the point in that. But besides that, everything else that happened in the film was fantastic. Dormammu, I came to bargain, kind of was weird for me because by the rules of a timeless being, right? Dormammu is said to be a timeless being because he doesn't get affected by time. So Doctor Strange is using the time stone to manipulate time against Dormammu. That shouldn't work because remember, Dormammu doesn't get affected by time, timeless being. So anyway, that's kind of weird, but other than that, it was still cool. The idea was there. It was executed reasonably well, but like I said, certain unnecessary things and probably a lot more kind of personal details could have been given about the character of Doctor Strange. We didn't really get to see him, like actually talking out, certain things like his problems and all of that. But nonetheless, it had its own thing going on, and it was decent. Logan, a fantastic ending to the Wolverine. This was definitely my favorite Wolverine film. Way better than X-Men Origins. Way better than what's this? This one. Where is that? No. Where are you? The Wolverine. Yeah, way better than the Wolverine itself. Logan was a very, very nice take, R-rated take as well, on the character by Hugh Jackman. It was really nice, really well ended, very holistic film. And it kind of was a superhero film because Logan still comes back to help all of these mutant kids who he initially didn't want to, like in every other film. But in the end, he comes back because deep down he is still an X-Men. and that was nice. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Man, they really overdid this film, and they overdid it so well that I liked it. Because, I mean, it's Guardians of the Galaxy. You're meant to be crazy, you're meant to be funky, you're meant to be all full of all this weird stuff. And Guardians of the Galaxy 2 brought back all of that. Once again, this is not a real superhero film because it was more of a personal vendetta. Again, like, I don't know why, but it turns out to be that half of the time. But regardless, it was really nice to see a very creepy plot of Star Lord's father and the team kind of coming together to stop him because apparently he will eventually take over everything else in the universe. So they kind of did the right thing, but we don't get to see the scale of it because apparently it's just them versus the villain, and the rest of the cops that come in and join the fight are not really there, unfortunately. Spider-Man: Homecoming, a really good start to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but honestly, Tom Holland deserves a lot better. He is honestly probably the best Spider-Man by far, but his story was really bad. Homecoming was dictated by Tony Stark. It was pretty much Spider-Man with Tony Stark's suit. Now, let me just try to look for one of my old reviews. This film, Homecoming, was kind of boring in the sense where it didn't really capture Spider-Man for what he really is, in the sense where he is an independent guy who struggles with his dual personality. He has had a past where he lost his uncle and he's trying to make up for the losses. He's trying to and all of these things, but it turns out this guy has pretty much a good life with everything else except when he is Spider-Man. Like, his Peter Parker life was nearly fantastic. No, I mean, anyway, let me just read out a little bit of the details of my review that I had written long ago regarding this film. So I said that Tom Holland and Michael Keaton both delivered brilliant performances. They carried the acting in the film. Their friends are nothing really special. It is a slow-paced movie which felt interesting for a change of pace compared to the previous takes on the wall crawler, but the concept was delivered poorly. The melodramatic high school life was not really emphasized. The title, Homecoming, was not really deserved by this film because it's not really about homecoming. We only got it for about 10 minutes. The real title should be Spider-Man, and Tony Stark's suit. Because that's what this film was about. Him trying to keep the suit, him trying to be Tony Stark's little boy. And then at the end, finally, when he redeems himself as his very own Spider-Man, Homecoming, which is such a big deal, is just brushed off because it was never really about homecoming in this film. It was nothing to do with homecoming, to be honest. He just apparently ended up going for homecoming one day, and then that was it. So you didn't really get to see the full potential of him and his character, and also because the plane fight kind of disallows Spider-Man from showing his full strength of web slinging and all. We didn't get the best Spider-Man fight either in this film. Homecoming was kind of underwhelming for me, but nonetheless it was a good start because I truly enjoyed the performances of Tom Holland and Michael Keaton, which is fantastic. Wonder Woman, a good film, not a great film, but a good film nonetheless. The ending fight was kind of weird, but I guess if you really ask for weird, Wonder Woman would still be flying around in her invisible plane. So compared to that, this did to the character's justice. It definitely brought Wonder Woman back to the big screen, and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman did a fantastic job. There was so much of hate against her. So many people who didn't like her character. So many people still do not like her, I think. But she was fantastic. She was fantastic. Patty Jenkins did a reasonably good job. She stayed true to the tone that Snyder had brought in. Used Snyder's the music that they had built for Wonder Woman, and yeah, we had a fantastic film. Thor Ragnarok, I personally didn't really like this film because it once again makes Thor into a comedy character just because he's being played by a comedian like Chris Hemsworth. I have to say that it's turning out that Chris Hemsworth is a comedian now, so I didn't really like that part of Thor, but having him redeem himself eventually and then come back in that fight against Hela and then destroying you know, Asgard and all. It kind of felt true to the character's tone of being this guy that's all about chaos, right? That's what Thor is, because the film literally starts off with him hanging upside down and taunting Surtur. So you kind of understand that that's what Thor's character is all about. But the thing that really didn't make sense to me about Thor Ragnarok is this, right? So Odin says that um, Asgard is not a place; it's the people. And then someone else, I think Odin also, says that Hela gets stronger as she gets closer to Asgard because Asgardians draw their power from Asgard. So, and then Odin says that Asgard is not the place; it's the people. So what? Asgardians get their strength from the people, and then you destroy Asgard, which means that Hela loses her power. But he just said that Asgardians are not a place; it's the people. So that means Hela should still have a power, right? I don't know what on earth they were coming up with, but it felt like someone really just wrote whatever came out of their head, didn't really read it after that, and just went with it. And it was stupid as hell. But nonetheless, it was a really colorful film. Very Guardians of the Galaxy ish. That's what I gotta say. Justice League. Justice League, because this was by Joss Whedon, remember? The director, Zack Snyder, should not have been credited for this trash of a film because, as we all know, as we get closer and closer to releasing the Snyder Cut, I do believe in it. We realize that Snyder has so much content that he's been posting up again and again that this was clearly not his film at all. And then Joss Whedon did not do justice to any of these amazing actors who came together to be on the big screen. And Henry Cavill's Superman with the mustache CGI. Oh god, I don't even want to talk about it. This was miserable, guys. This is miserable. Black Panther, great film, a great Black Panther film. But this is not entirely a superhero film, and there was a very major plot hole in this film. The plot hole is that, okay, you're a super advanced civilization, right? Like Wakanda, right? But you're deciding who becomes your king in what, close combat? Hand to hand? Like, seriously? Most advanced nation in the world, they say. Let's beat each other to see who becomes king. It was stupid, alright? Secondly, Killmonger clearly defeated T'Challa, right? But everyone betrays their new king and their own rules just so that they can have T'Challa as their king. And then T'Challa was not killed, so he comes back. But that wasn't the rule. The rule was if you fall off the edge, or you get defeated, or you get declared the winner, or the other person surrenders, then you've already won. And they already declared that he won. They already gave him the powers of the Black Panther. So it makes no sense that Killmonger should, is like not a king anymore. Everyone should still follow him. So plot wise, they really messed that up. But overall, the performances of every actor, the tone of the film, the dialogues in the film, everything was fantastic. It was a good film. But yeah, I really didn't like that plot. It's really stupid. Everything, like this MCU guys, I don't know what on earth they think when they write these plots, right? Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not that great of a film. Subpar film, very bad villain. It was very much carried by Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly. It's pretty much just that. That's all I gotta say about this film. Nothing very special about this film. So yeah, Avengers: Infinity War, great film, probably the best Avengers film, followed by Age of Ultron. A film that really managed to show as many characters as they could on screen, but didn't do justice to every character. And I mean, I really expected Endgame to be the best, right? Because I thought they have to step up from this, because this was an amazing film, and then they just jumped off the bridge to the very bottom. So that was that. Infinity War was really about these people coming together to save the universe, right? Not just the Earth. But this film lacked in a lot of sense where it was just the Avengers. Like, where is the rest of the universe? Are you telling me that there's no one else in the universe that wants to fight? And like Captain Marvel says that she's been defending other planets, but does she know that Thanos is going to snap half of the universe that may have included her? Like, that's kind of very convenient. But of course, we all know how the Russo brothers go about their plot. So by plot convenience, only the characters that they needed to show in the next movie remained, and everyone else was removed to make the movie easier to be written. That is the truth. That was Infinity War. Aquaman. This was a pretty fun film, right? Yeah, it's a pretty fun film. It was not a Snyder film, and it didn't have the seriousness of it. It was a very kind of melodramatic, funny kind of film, which is kind of nice for a change of pace. Um, and I guess it kind of made sense in that sense. But here's the thing, right? Um, they say that King Orm needs to rule over everything to become Ocean Master or something like that. But then in the end, just like he's Ocean Master anyway. So what is the point in that whole Ocean Master thingy? So yeah, there's that, and then he already had the power to like destroy like everything on the shore of like the place where Arthur Curry was staying. Right? He attacks with this tidal wave, and then he doesn't do that for the rest of the film. And then everyone on Earth, like the people covering the media and everything, they never really go to investigate on these, and then they do know that there are apparently people underwater, and no one else goes to investigate it. It's just kind of very tunnel visioned into the story of this underwater kingdom. But nonetheless, it was a visual spectacle. The plot was subpar, but visually it was a very good film. Deadpool 2 stayed true to the tone of the first film. Once again, not a superhero film, more of a personal vendetta film. It was once again that same thing exactly, but with a lot more comedy. So, yep, comedy films sell a lot more. Venom. That was an attempt. Dark Phoenix. I don't know what to say about this. I don't even know what to say. What did I say about this? I think. Don't watch this. Don't watch this film. It was a bad film. Yeah, that's what I gotta say. Yeah. I'm trying to think what was good about this film. Nothing was good about it. Mystique died without much justice being done to her. Apparently, she becomes Dark Phoenix, and then all of a sudden she's more powerful than everyone else. There's no real explanation to that. She just, oh, I'm more powerful. And then, in the Apocalypse film, she already kind of unleashed her powers, and the Phoenix was already there. But in this film, another entity goes into her body. So, what is the Phoenix we saw in Apocalypse? So, I don't know. It's just a weird film. Captain Marvel, stupid film. This was a film that was unnecessary. Um, or rather, it was necessary, but it was done in the most unnecessary way because there was no character development. Carol Danvers is the same from start to the end. Then all of a sudden, she can use her powers because she just removed this thing that was on her neck from the very beginning. And I mean, the aliens that she was with, the Kree, right? They could have brainwashed her from the get go, but they never did it apparently. No one knows why, and then they gave her a new name, and then eventually she finds her way to Earth. She learns the truth about herself, and then all of a sudden she can just do everything she needs to in her powers. She can barely control her powers at the start, and then in the ending she can do whatever the hell she wants. What kind of character development is that? I have no idea. No idea. I think the best part about Captain Marvel with the Kree, not the Kree, what are those shape-shifting things? The Skrulls. Yeah, the Skrulls were the best part of Captain Marvel, pretty much. Spider-Man: Far From Home. So I've already made a review on this film, and it's very recent. You guys can check that out. But nonetheless, this film has some plot holes that I didn't address in my review, so I'm going to address it now. And one of that is this fact, right? So Peter Parker needed to tell Edith that he wants to pass full control to Quentin Beck. And then when he defeats Mysterio in the ending, he just straight up takes the Edith, puts it on and just tells Edith to retreat and withdraw all the drones. And Edith straight up listens to him. Like, he has already passed full control to Mysterio, but Mysterio didn't pass control back to him. But he can just control Edith. And Edith is not an AI. Edith is a voice command because Edith doesn't think for itself. It just does whatever it is asked to do. So there is that. But I guess the scene that kind of may make sense is the one where one of Mysterio's crew members actually had downloaded Edith. And there's a possibility that they have programmed Edith already to be fully under Mysterio's control, even though Peter Parker can command it. So there's a lot of things that are unanswered in this film, and it has a lot of post-credit scenes that are better than the rest of the film itself. The only thing that Spider-Man Far From Home did well is its action. Its action and its graphics are the best in any MCU film that I've ever seen before, and possibly one of the best in any film that I've ever seen before. The fight scenes between him and Mysterio were insanely good. The performances of Tom Holland and Jake Gyllenhaal was amazing. Everything else about the film was bad. That's my review on it. Avengers Endgame. You all know why you're here. It's most likely from this. So I'm done talking about Endgame. Shazam. Shazam was another film that had really subpar execution, but it stayed true to its tone of being cheeky from the very get-go to the very end. It was more for a kid's film, and it turned into that. And then we have the Joker, which we don't know much about, so we're going to keep it, unknown for now. So what we have learned is that out of all these superhero films, right, there's probably only about 10 of them that are actually complete, holistic superhero films that actually do what superheroes do in the comics. The rest of them are just films that are made so that they are flashy, and at least half of them have their own unique take on it by a different director. So what we have learned from all of these different things that I've gone through is that we can't expect consistency anymore because everyone just wants to do their own thing, and there are people doing it purely for laughter and to just sell toys later on, for money, for the color, to flaunt their visual effects and all of that. And then there are some directors who are trying to come up with the best plot they can, really interesting character development, really serious tone and all these things, but get underappreciated. And then the highest grossing films are of course those that have the literal brain dead storylines, and the ones that are really really like actually honest and good are kind of films that you don't get to hear much about. Let me search. I knew it. The Watchmen is not here, and I need to know why. Let's see. Very interesting. So The Watchmen is not on this list. Well, let me just add it and let you know that The Watchmen was another fantastic film where they were actually questioning the morality of heroes and the people, and them actually trying to save the world, though not as a team. That was kind of the downside to The Watchmen, but The Watchmen was all about them being broken up. So that was the story of that film. So that was pretty much the idea, and the visuals in that story were amazing. The question of morality was what really carried that film, right? So that was that. So at the end of the day, do these films really matter anymore? Because as it turns out, people are either doing it, with whatever they got just for the sake of breaking the box office, which is what Endgame is trying to do. Everyone's like, we have to watch it again, we have to re-release. Did you guys even see the re-release? They had incomplete footages. Like, look at BBS when the Ultimate Edition dropped. It's amazing. We actually got to see more amazing content. Avatar, when the extended edition dropped. That's what an extended edition is supposed to be, not the trash that Endgame released, which is a complete rip-off. Not really a rip-off. It's actually it's a fraud. Like, that's what it is, because it steals your money and gives you nothing else. And then, did you guys see the tribute that they gave in like Far From Home for like Black Widow and all the characters that died? They showed like a kid's PowerPoint slide, and then they made a joke of half of the world, half of the universe disappearing, a joke of all of that, and then there was no seriousness in the fact that these people were actually dead and then came back to reality. And then no one questioned the decision that Thanos had made, whether it was possibly the right decision, because Thanos did say that when he killed half of the people on his Earth, his atmosphere flourished and people called him a madman. But on Earth, what happened to that? What happened to all that amazing writing? It made no weight, carried no weight whatsoever. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if these superhero films should really stay true to the tone of the comics and be an actual story of a superhero, or should it be just whatever this the heck, for a brain dead filmmaking for the sake of laughs, comedy, which is what the MCU is all about, and just selling toys after that, or whether it should really question characters and dig into deep into them, like what they did with the BVS, what they did with the Watchmen, really change the way the characters are originally in the comics, for the sake of the director to get his own take on it, so long as he does the characters some justice. Or should it be an exact comic book film? I don't think we have any of that, like, much over here. I think the closest one probably was the very early on Superman, maybe the first Batman. Yeah, and maybe the Spider-Man film. Yeah, quite close. Other than that, there were a lot of things that the films actually contributed to the comics as well, and not just took from the comics. So there is that. So yep, that's it from me. It's been a good long 90 minutes. Appreciate you guys for dropping by and checking it out. Let me know what you guys think, which is what this channel is all about. I want you guys to discuss, give me your ideas so that we can keep developing this sense of kind of understanding, right? So that we both know how we can dig deeper into these films, because comic book films are here to stay. Superhero movies are going to keep going on for a long, long time to come, and I really hope that they keep getting better and not worse. And better means not for the sake of the cha-ching, the cash, the money, but better for the sake of actually teaching people what is the right thing to do and what it means to be an actual superhero. So yep, that's it from me. Adios.